They were just kids in oversized flannel shirts and scuffed sneakers when they chose the clearing behind the old baseball diamond. It was late autumn, the kind where the air tasted like rust and wood smoke, and the last leaves clung to the trees like they were afraid to fall. Nobody questioned why that particular spot felt right. Maybe because it was far from the teachers, far from parents, far from anyone who might tell them no. 7 of them stood in a crooked half-circle while Tommy Pike slammed the rusted shovel into the ground. Dirt flew in cold clumps, landing on the toes of their shoes. The time capsule was nothing more than a dented metal lunchbox someone's uncle had thrown out. They filled it with the usual junk: comic strips, candy wrappers, a baseball card bent at the corner. Nobody noticed when one kid, the quiet one who always walked a step behind the group, slipped something else inside. They didn't see the small shape wrapped in torn fabric. They didn't hear it shift. They laughed, they teased each other. They talked about how in 20 years they'd come back with jobs, cars, maybe their own kids. Then they buried the box, tamped the dirt down with their shoes, and carved a quick X on the nearest tree. By the time the last bell rang, the wind had already begun to erase their footprints. The years stretched and folded, 20 of them disappearing like breath on glass. One by one, the friends drifted apart. Graduations, breakups, jobs, debts, towns that swallowed them whole. Only the X on the old tree remained, gray and warped with age. When they finally gathered again, they weren't kids anymore. Their faces carried lines, their voices were lower, and the awkward excitement of childhood had worn into something thinner, quieter. They joked as they walked into the woods, but their laughter felt practiced. Tommy brought a new shovel. The quiet one brought nothing at all. The clearing looked smaller than any of them remembered, but the X on the tree was still there, barely visible through years of moss. Tommy knelt, jabbed the shovel into the cold ground, and started digging. It took only minutes. The metal box came up like a bone, mud-slick, dented, trembling in Tommy's hands. But the joke stopped the moment he lifted the lid. The box wasn't intact. It was split wide open, the edges peeled outward as if something inside had clawed its way free. A single, small glove lay folded inside. Beside it, a note in childish handwriting: "I'm here." The inside of the metal was streaked with long, wet scratches. Tommy dropped the box. Someone swore. The quiet one stepped back, pale as frost. And in the silence that followed, the trees seemed to lean closer, listening. None of them noticed the tiny footprints, fresh, deep, leading away from the clearing and into the forest's dark throat. But soon, the whole town would. The first person vanished 3 days after they dug up the capsule. At first, nobody tied the two events together. Small towns don't jump to horror movie conclusions. They whisper about bad luck, about someone running off, about debts or secrets, anything but the truth. Her name was Marlene Henson, the kind of woman who left her porch light on even during daytime in case someone needed help. She lived 2 blocks from the hardware store and took morning walks before the sun climbed over the grain silos. On Tuesday, she never came back. Her neighbor found her front door ajar, a mug of lukewarm tea still steaming, faintly, like she'd stepped out for a second. Her shoes sat neatly by the mat. No signs of struggle, just a quiet house still holding its breath. But outside, that was different. In the strip of dirt between her porch and the hedges were footprints. Not child-sized, smaller, too small. They looked like the steps of something light, almost weightless, but pressed deep enough that the edges were still sharp. The tracks circled the house twice, then stopped abruptly by the back gate, as if whatever made them simply vanished into the tall grass. The sheriff tried to brush it off. Maybe raccoon tracks, maybe erosion. Nobody believed him. The prints had 5 tiny toes, human toes. By sunset, people were locking their doors early. Mothers called their kids home before the streetlights flickered on. Even the wind seemed to move differently that evening, brushing through town as if carrying something with it, something that had finally woken up after 20 long years. The friends, the ones who dug up the capsule, met again at the old diner. None of them wanted to say it out loud, but the fear sat between them like a 7th companion. Tommy wouldn't stop tapping his fingers on the table. "I'm telling you," he muttered, "those marks in the metal, something lived in there." June looked sick, lived or grew. Only the quiet one stayed silent, staring at the condensation sliding down his water glass. His hands trembled every now and then, like he was remembering something he didn't want to remember. When the sheriff walked into the diner to question them, "You kids were near those woods Sunday, right?" The quiet one finally stood up. "We need to show him the box," he said. His voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was flat, resigned. They all stared. He didn't meet their eyes, because deep down he already knew what the others were too afraid to consider. Whatever was in that capsule, it hadn't stayed small. And now it was walking their streets looking for someone. The next morning, rain rolled over the town in slow, heavy sheets, turning the streets into mirrors. Most people stayed inside. The friends met again anyway, this time in the quiet one's garage. The door pulled down, the air thick with the smell of damp cardboard and old motor oil. They formed a loose circle around him. He stood by his workbench, fingers curled around the edge like he needed to hold something solid. "I didn't tell you everything," he said finally. Nobody moved. He opened an old shoebox and pulled out a stack of wrinkled drawings, childish sketches made with waxy crayons. At first glance they looked innocent, a forest, a treehouse, a group of kids. Then June picked one up, and the silence tightened. In the corner of every drawing, barely noticeable, was a shape. Small, dark, wrong. Something crouching, watching. "We thought you were drawing imaginary friends," Tommy whispered. The quiet one shook his head. "It wasn't imaginary. I found it the summer before we buried the capsule." He didn't sit. He didn't look at them. He just spoke, staring past them like the words were coming from somewhere far away. "I heard crying in the woods, like a kitten or something. But when I followed the sound, it wasn't an animal. It was small, like a toddler. But it didn't stand right." He swallowed. "Its legs bent the wrong way." Marlene covered her mouth. "It wasn't hurt, just hungry. I tried giving it food, but it spit everything out. It only liked warm things." His voice cracked briefly. "It followed me home for days, slept under my porch, scratched at my window at night." Tommy stepped back. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because it liked me," he said softly. "It listened. It would copy my movements, my voice, and I thought it was lonely. He rubbed his palms on his jeans. I thought if I put it in the capsule, it would stay safe. We were kids. We thought that box could hold anything. June stared at him like he'd turned into a stranger. You locked a living thing underground? His jaw tensed, guilt years old finally surfacing. I thought it would sleep or stop. I didn't know it would grow. Tommy kicked the leg of the workbench, furious and terrified at once. Marlene is gone because of you. The quiet one didn't argue. He just whispered, It scratches when it's hungry, and we woke it up. Outside in the rain, something small darted across the end of the driveway, a shape too quick to see clearly, but they all felt it. It had found their scent. And it was getting bolder. By Thursday morning, the town felt hollowed out. People walked faster, talked quieter, kept their porch lights burning even after sunrise. Rumors about Marlene spread like cracks in thin ice. Someone heard screaming near the woods. Someone else saw lights flickering behind the old water tower. Nobody mentioned footprints, but everyone knew. That evening, it happened again. The siblings who lived in the yellow house at the end of Willow Street didn't show up for school. Their father, a night shift trucker, came home to find the front door locked, dinner plates still on the table, cartoons frozen on the TV screen. Nothing disturbed, nothing broken, nothing normal. The sheriff's car arrived first, then the neighbors, then the friends, drawn not by curiosity, but by the same tug in their stomachs, the same cold certainty that whatever took Marlene had come back. The quiet one stood slightly behind the group when they stepped into the living room. His eyes went straight to the window above the couch, the only thing out of place. It was open, just a crack, but the curtains fluttered like something had slipped inside, not out. The sheriff didn't notice the prints at first. They were on the sill, faint but unmistakable. Small, bare feet, the toes too long and too thin. The creature had climbed in. June whispered, It watched them while they slept. Tommy's hands balled into fists. Why take the kids? The quiet one didn't answer. He didn't have to. They all felt it, a slow, suffocating dread filling the space where answers should be. Outside, in the yard, the grass lay pressed in a strange pattern. Something had crouched there, waiting, motionless for who knows how long, watching the house, watching the children, maybe watching him. The quiet one turned toward the woods. Between the trees, something shifted, a silhouette small as a child, but wrong in the way a shadow is wrong when the light source is gone. It took one step back, then another, then it melted into the black. It wasn't afraid of them, not anymore. By Friday night, the woods had turned into something else, not a place, but a pulse. The air between the trees felt thicker, like it had weight, like it was pressing gently against anyone who stepped too close. Even the birds avoided the branches. Even the wind skirted the treetops instead of slipping through them. Still, the friends went in. Flashlights in hand, they followed the faint trail of footprints that wound behind the yellow house and disappeared into the undergrowth. The beams shook with every step. No one wanted to say out loud that the tracks looked fresher than the ones found earlier, as if the creature had been back again, watching them prepare. The quiet one walked ahead, though he barely seemed to breathe. Every few steps he paused, head tilted, listening to something the others couldn't hear. Tommy hissed, "Stop doing that! You keep acting like you know where it is." "I do," he murmured. "It always stayed close to trees. Liked the dark, liked shade. It can move faster there." They didn't ask how he knew. They didn't want to. The deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. Tree trunks were etched with long vertical gouges, not deep enough to fell a tree, but enough to peel bark in curling strips. At first they thought it was vandalism, maybe deer. Then they found one too low, then one too high, and then one running in a spiral around a trunk, tight and deliberate, like something had wrapped around it. June's flashlight caught something hanging from a branch, a child's sock, soaked and stiff. Beneath it, on the ground, lay marbles arranged in a perfect circle. The missing boy from Willow Street liked marbles. June stepped back, hand over her mouth. "It's playing with their things." "No," the quiet one said. "It's leaving messages." A twig snapped somewhere ahead, then another, then silence so deep it felt like the ground exhaled. They froze. Tommy whispered, "Did you hear that?" But the quiet one wasn't looking ahead. He turned slowly to his left, flashlight shaking in his hand. Something had brushed his sleeve, lightly, like a fingertip tracing fabric. He swung the light. White! For the briefest moment, a pale face appeared between two trunks. Small, smooth, eyes too wide, too dark, reflecting the beam like wet stones. The head tilted at an unnatural angle, curious the way a child studies a bug. Then it slipped backward, soundless, swallowed by the black. June grabbed his arm. "What did you—" Before she finished, the forest echoed with a soft giggle. Not human, not animal. A high, breathy imitation of a laugh, a mimicry of something it had heard long ago. Tommy swore and stumbled back, nearly dropping his light. The quiet one didn't move. His voice was barely a whisper. "It remembers us." The giggle drifted again, from somewhere else now, deeper in the woods. Then the wind changed direction, and the trees began to sway in unison, as if something large or many small things were moving between them, hunting, waiting, guiding them somewhere. The woods weren't just breathing, they were inviting. They didn't leave the woods so much as they escaped them, bursting out near the drainage ditch behind the old bike trail, gasping like they'd surfaced from deep water. Even then, none of them spoke until they reached the quiet one's car. The doors shut, the world sealed out, and only then did Tommy finally explode.
"Enough! You tell us everything right now!"
The quiet one didn't argue. He sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, though the engine wasn't on. His knuckles were white, his breathing uneven. He looked like someone standing on the edge of a memory he'd never meant to revisit. "It didn't start with the crying in the woods," he said. "I left something out." June's voice shook.
What else could there possibly be?
He didn't look at them. "I wasn't the first one it found." That stopped the air in the car. "When I first saw it, it wasn't alone. There was another kid, a boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Dirty, scared. He hid behind a stump when I approached. I asked him if he was lost. He didn't answer. He swallowed hard. The creature was beside him, not chasing him, not hurting him, just standing there, like it didn't understand why the boy looked terrified. Tommy scared. There was another kid? What happened to him? The quiet one rubbed his forehead. We played for a while, or tried to. The boy wouldn't talk. The thing followed us everywhere. The boy cried every time it got close, so I told it to stay back, and it listened. His voice cracked, finally, after all these years. But that night, the boy never went home. Nobody ever found him. They searched the woods for days. Adults said maybe he wandered into the river, maybe he was taken by someone passing through. June's breathing stopped.
You knew.
A long silence. I knew he didn't go into the river, he said quietly. I knew it took him, or followed him, or something happened between them. Tommy slammed his fist against the dashboard.
And you just buried the damn thing in a box instead of telling someone?
I was a kid, he shot back, eyes suddenly shining with tears. I thought it was my fault the boy disappeared. I thought if I hid the creature, nobody else would get hurt.
You lied to us. When we dug that capsule up, you already knew what might be inside.
He didn't deny it. I thought 20 years was enough time. I thought maybe it died in there, or went dormant, or stopped being what it was. He looked up at them then, and they all saw the fear he'd been carrying since childhood. But it remembers everything. The drawings, the games, the boy, me. Tommy swallowed. What does it want now? The quiet one's answer was barely audible. A replacement. The wind outside shook the car, but none of them turned to look, because in the tree line, at the edge of the parking lot, something small stood just beyond the headlights, waiting, patient, still as a photograph, watching them with the same wide, unblinking eyes from the woods. That night, the town didn't sleep. By dusk, every porch light glowed like a warning signal. Curtains stayed drawn. Parents double-checked locks twice, then 3 times. Even dogs refused to go outside, pacing in tight circles with their hackles raised. The friends met at June's house, all of them too scared to stay alone. They barricaded themselves in the living room with baseball bats, a crowbar, and Tommy's jittery insistence that this is all we can do. The quiet one sat by the window, staring at the dark yard like he expected it to move. It didn't take long before it did. Just after midnight, something tapped the glass. Not a knock, not a branch, a tap. Light, rhythmic, like fingers learning the motion. June gasped. Tommy whispered a curse. The quiet one didn't blink. The blinds shivered as if brushed by small hands. Tap, tap, ta-tap. Then silence. June whispered, "It's copying us again. It remembers knocking on your window when you were little." The quiet one nodded grimly. It always wanted me to come out and play. Tommy moved toward the window, bat raised. "If it touches that handle, I swear." But the quiet one grabbed his arm. "Don't. If you threaten it, it'll stop mimicking and start hunting." A soft scrape slid down the siding, slow, deliberate, almost thoughtful. Something climbed. They heard its tiny feet press against the wall, moving sideways like a spider. Then another sound, a high whisper. Not words, more like breath shaped into a question. It was trying to speak. June covered her ears. "Make it stop! Make it stop!" The quiet one looked toward the window again, throat tight. "It won't stop until I answer." He stood. Tommy's eyes widened. "Sit down! You're not opening that window!" "I'm not," he said, voice thin. "But if I don't respond, it'll start trying doors, then the neighbor's doors. It's persistent." He stepped closer and placed his palm gently against the glass. Everything outside went still. Then a small pale hand pressed back from the darkness, perfectly aligned with his own. Too small to belong to any child, too long-fingered to belong to anything human. June screamed. Tommy grabbed her. The quiet one stayed frozen. The hand slowly slid downward, leaving a wet print on the pane, as if its skin was damp with soil or something else. Then the whisper came again, this time clearer, higher, reedy, a single desperate syllable. "Come." The quiet one stepped back, as if struck. "No," he whispered, "not anymore." The hand recoiled, so did the shadow behind it. For a moment the creature seemed confused, then its confusion twisted into something else, something sharp, something hungry. The scraping returned, faster now, moving toward the kitchen door. Tommy shouted, "It's going around the house!" June sobbed, "What does it want?" The quiet one answered without looking at them, eyes fixed on the darkened hallway. "It wants the boy it lost, and it thinks that's still me." The creature circled the house for nearly 10 minutes. 10 minutes that felt like hours. Every shuffle of its feet, every brush of small fingers against the siding sent a cold ripple through the room. The friends clutched their makeshift weapons, but none of them dared breathe too loud. It wasn't searching for a way inside. It was testing them, learning their reactions, listening to their fear. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. June whispered, "Is it gone?" But the quiet one shook his head. He stood perfectly still, as if listening to a signal only he could hear. His face drained of color. "It's not leaving," he said. "It's waiting." Tommy frowned. "Waiting for what?" "For me to run." A heavy silence dropped over them. Outside, not even the wind moved. The quiet one stepped toward the hallway, and June grabbed his wrist. "You're not going out there," he said. "I have to. If I stay inside, it'll start tearing at the doors, and once it realizes it can't reach me, it'll look for someone easier." They all knew he meant the neighbors, the kids down the street, anyone. The creature didn't think in morals, only in instinct. Tommy swore under his breath. "Okay, fine, then we go with you." He said, "You don't understand. It doesn't want you. It wants me. If you come, you'll slow me down." June shook her head. "We're not splitting up. Not tonight." Before he could argue, something thudded against the back door. Then again, harder. The creature wasn't knocking anymore. It was pushing, testing the strength of the wood. Tommy grabbed the crowbar. "We need a plan. Where can we trap it, or kill it, or hell, anything?" The quiet one closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them with a trembling certainty. "There's only one place it ever hid, one place it went when it was scared." June's voice dropped. "The forest?" He said, "No, deeper, past the creek. There's a small hollow under the roots of a dead oak. It used to crawl inside when the sun was too bright." Tommy blinked. "You remember that from when you were 10? His voice broke. "You don't forget things like that." The back door cracked sharply, wood splintering. They didn't have time to debate. "Fine," Tommy said, grabbing his jacket. "We lure it to the hollow. If it wants you that bad, it'll follow. Once it's inside, maybe we can block the entrance or set it on fire or something." June's hands were shaking as she grabbed a flashlight. "We can't leave it alive." The quiet one didn't disagree. Another crack. A hinge squealed. They slipped out the front, staying low, moving fast across the wet grass. Behind them, something small pushed the back door inward with a soft, eager sound. Tommy whispered, "It's coming." The quiet one looked toward the tree line, toward the darkness, and the darkness seemed to lean forward. He said, "Good, let it." Because the hunt was already begun, and this time they weren't the only ones afraid. The forest swallowed them faster than they expected. One moment they were slipping through backyards, the next the trees closed in, thick and black, branches knitting overhead like fingers locking shut. Their flashlights carved thin tunnels through the dark, but it never felt like enough. The shadows moved too easily, too willingly. Tommy whispered, "How far is this hollow?" The quiet one didn't look back. "A few minutes, if we stay on the old path." June lifted her light toward the trees. "There is no path." "There is," he said. "You just can't see it unless you know where it leads." As if in answer, a faint rustle came from behind them. Small feet, light but deliberate, matching their pace step for step, never too close, never too far. Following, studying. June's breath hitched. "It's toying with us." "No," the quiet one murmured. "It's excited." Tommy winced. "Fantastic." They pushed deeper until the trees began to thin, forming a crooked ring around a single fallen oak. The trunk lay split like a snapped spine, roots exposed in a chaotic curl. At the base yawned a black opening, small, jagged, almost like an animal burrow, except for one detail. The edges were worn smooth, polished by something that had crawled in and out for years. June whispered, "This is it?" "This is where it hid, where it slept, where it dragged that boy." The air changed, colder, stiller. Something was watching. Tommy tightened his grip on the crowbar. "So what's the plan? You go inside and—" A sound cut him off. A high, thin hum drifted through the clearing. Not a voice, more like a vibration. The quiet one stiffened. "It's calling me," he said, almost in a trance. "It thinks I'm coming home." Tommy grabbed his arm. "You're not going in there." But the creature had already stepped into the light. It appeared at the far side of the clearing, small enough to be mistaken for a child at first glance. But its limbs were too long, too soft-looking, as if they'd never borne weight the way human legs should. Its head tilted in that familiar wrong angle. June's hand flew to her mouth. "God, it's taller!" The creature took one step toward the quiet one, then another, and then it smiled. A stretched, crooked mimicry of the way children grin when they see a friend they've missed for too long. Tommy hissed, "Back up, now!" But the quiet one didn't move. His eyes locked with its. Something old flickered there. Fear, guilt, recognition. "It remembers me," he whispered. The creature extended a hand, small, pale, trembling. Then slowly it pointed toward the hollow under the roots. Home. Suddenly, branches snapped behind them, loud, close. The friends spun around just as something else moved in the dark. Not the creature. Something dragged across the forest floor, something heavy. June gasped. "Is that—" A shoe, small, muddy, attached to a leg they all prayed was still alive. Another missing person. The creature giggled softly. It hadn't come alone. The leg dragged forward another inch, toes scraping through the leaves. June stumbled back with a strangled cry. Tommy raised the crowbar, knuckles white, but the creature didn't flinch. It didn't even look at its captive. Its wide black eyes were fixed only on the quiet one, as if the person it had dragged here was nothing more than bait. The quiet one swallowed hard. "Let them go." The creature tilted its head. That awful, childlike mimic smile flickered again. A trembling stretch of lips that had learned the idea of smiling, but not the meaning. It pointed at him, then at the hollow under the oak, then tapped its chest. June whispered, "It wants you to take their place." The creature waited, patient as a loyal dog that simply didn't understand why its friend ran away 20 years ago. Its thin chest rose and fell with quick, excited breaths. It shifted from foot to foot, the way kids do when they're about to grab a friend's hand. The quiet one stepped forward. Tommy grabbed him. "Don't! You'll die down there!" He shook his head. "If I don't, others will." The creature leaned closer, trembling with anticipation. But then, its smile collapsed. A new expression twisted across its face, sharp and sudden. Confusion. The quiet one's flashlight beam flickered across his features, and the creature froze, its head cocked further, studying him like a puzzle whose pieces didn't fit. It took one slow step back. June whispered, "What's it doing?" The quiet one's voice cracked. "It's realizing something." Because he wasn't a boy anymore. And it wasn't looking for a man. The creature's lips parted in a thin wail, soft, heartbroken, rising like a child crying in a store aisle, realizing the person they followed wasn't their parent after all. It backed away from him, toward the hollow, toward the dragging body. Tommy swore. "It's going to take the new one instead." The quiet one stepped forward, shouting, "Stop!" The creature's eyes snapped to him, furious now, betrayed. It hissed, a wet, trembling sound, and vanished under the roots with its captive, swallowed by the dark. Silence crashed over the clearing. June sobbed. Tommy cursed into his hands. The quiet one stood trembling, staring at the hollow. "It didn't want me." His voice shook. "It wanted the boy I used to be." And somewhere beneath the dead oak, something moved. Small hands scraping deeper into the earth. Still searching. Still choosing. Not done.